Hello students, welcome to HIM tutorials. We have been doing chapter number 9, that is plants, form and function, and the topic, that is the structure of flower. So let's begin with the main heading, that is what is flower. So flower is the most attractive part. What is the flower? Flower is the most attractive part of plant. Also, flowering bud give rise to flower, and flower is the reproductive part of plant, because plant when reproduce and there is transfer of the pollen grains from the male part to the female part with the help of process called as pollination, that time the fertilization takes place, the zygote is formed and reproduction goes on. So the flowers are very important part because they help to produce new seeds in the plant. Okay. Now let's discuss that what is the structure of flower and what are the main parts which are present in structure of flower which help in reproduction. This is the main part, or you can say this is the part which is joined to the branch of the plant, and the part which is joined to the branch and the swollen part, in between the swollen part of the flower, this part is called as pedicel. This is the pedicel. In case of leaf it is petiole, and in case of flower this is called as the pedicel. Now the swollen part, this swollen part which is just above the pedicel, this is called as the thalamus. And thalamus is that part of the flower which tries to, or you can say which helps to join all the parts of the flower to one point. Okay. Now the outermost whorl, this is the outermost whorl, and this outermost whorl is formed by the sepals, and sepals are something that which tries to protect the flower when it is bud. If I draw a bud here, this is a bud, then outside the bud there is presence of green color leaves. This kind of green color leaves are present outside the bud, and these green color leaves tries to protect the flower when it is in a form of bud. So these leaves, when the flower blooms out, then these leaves get they remain attached to the flower, and that leaf like structures are called as the sepals, and group of sepals is called as the calyx. Group of sepals is called as the calyx. Now inside it there is presence of second whorl of the flower, and it is brightly colored. And why it is brightly colored? To attract the insects for the process of the pollinations. So these type of structures, brightly colored structures, these are called as the petals. And the group of petals is called as the corolla. Group of petals is called as the corolla. So first whorl is of sepals, it is 4 to 5 number, and group of sepals is called as calyx, And the second whorl is of what? Petals, and these petals are, when they group together, they form the corolla part. And these two, petals and sepals, they are the non-essential whorls. Non-essential whorls. The sepal is the first whorl and the petal is the second whorl. Now the third whorl, that is of male part, like this. That is of male part. They may vary in number, and this male part has got the lobed structure on it. This is bilobed structure. And this male part is called as stamen. This male part is called as stamen. And this stamen has two parts in it. The upper part is the anther and the lower part is the filament. The upper part is the anther and the lower part is filament, and this anther and filament, they together form the stamen. Now in the anther there are round structures present. This type of round structures are present, and these round structures are called as pollen grains. Means anthers has got round sac-like structures, and inside those sac-like structures, which are called as pollens, there is presence of the pollen grains. So this is the third part, and stamen is the male part of the flower. Stamen is the male part of the flower. Also, this is the third whorl of the flower. It is the third whorl of the flower. Now the innermost part and the most important part of the flower is the female part, and it is divided into almost 4 structures. This is the innermost part. This type of structures are present in the inside part, and this female part is called as carpel or pistil. Now this female part is divided into 4 parts. The upper part, this is the stigma. The stigma is joined to this part, the lower part. So the middle part, which is joining the upper part and the lower part, this is called as, the middle part is called as the style, and this part, the swollen part, this is called as the ovary, and inside the ovaries, these dark structures present, which are the female gametes, and these are called as the ovules. Male gametes are the pollen grains and female gametes are the ovules. Also, this carpel or pistil, it is called as the gynoecium. And this male part, which is called as the stamen, it is also called as androecium. So this is all about the structure of the flower. As you can see, the base part which attaches the flower to the branch, that is the pedicel, the swollen part on which all the whorls of the flower, all the parts, accessory part and non-accessory part, they attached, that is called as the thalamus. Now the first whorl after the thalamus is of sepals. The group of sepals is called as calyx. It is the first whorl. The second whorl is of petals, and petals are the brightly colored leaves of the flower, and these brightly colored structures are present because these brightly colored structures help to attract the insects for the process which is called as pollination, or the process called as pollination. Now this petals and sepals, they form the non-essential whorls, okay, because they are not contributing in the reproduction directly. But the third whorl and the fourth whorl, the third whorl is stamen, which has two main parts, anther which has got pollen grains in it, and the filament part which helps the anther to attach to the thalamus. And this stamen is also called as androecium, and it is the male part of the flower. The gamete, male gamete, is the pollen grain. If I talk about the female part, then female part is called as carpel, or one name another is given to it, that is the pistil. It is also called as gynoecium, and it has four parts: the stigma part, the style, and the ovary. And inside the ovary, the ovules are present, and these ovules are the female gametes. Now this stamen and carpel, both the stamen and carpel are essential whorls. Important whorls. Why they are essential whorls in essential circles? Because they are directly involved in the process of reproduction, which leads to the formation of fruit and leads to the formation of seeds. When reproduction takes place, when fertilization takes place, that time the ovary will give rise to the fruit, and the ovules will give rise to the seeds. Okay. How reproduction takes place? With the help of process which is called as pollination. So while the pollination, what happens? The pollens from the anther, they transfer to the stigma of the female part. As pollens, with the help of wind or with the help of insect body, they just transfer from the anther to the stigma. When the pollens transfer from anther to stigma, then this stigma tries to secrete a secretion, a sticky secretion, and with the help of that sticky secretion, the pollens are got attached at the tip of the female part, which is called as stigma. Now this pollen will tries to develop a pollen tube, and this pollen tube will slowly move towards the ovary and enters into the ovary. With the pollen tube, the male cells, the male gametes enter inside the ovary and they fuses with the female ovules. Male and female ovules, male and female gametes, when they fuse together, they lead to the formation of the zygote. Okay, and later on there is the formation of the fruit take place, and the ovary will give rise to the fruit part of the fruit, the pulp part of the fruit, and the seeds are formed by the modification of the ovules. So this is all about the structure of flower. I hope you understood the structure of flower very well. Now we will discuss about the process of pollination. Pollination it is a process in which the pollens from the anther of male part transfer to the stigma of female part. The process of pollination is that in which there is transfer of the pollen grains from the anther of the male part, means from the stamen to the stigma of the female part, means to the carpel. So if this is the male part, these are the anthers, and if it is a female part, then from the anther the pollens will transfer to the stigma of the female part. Okay, so this process is called as pollination. Now two types of pollination is there. One is self pollination, other one is the cross pollination. If I make two diagrams here, again here this type of structures, these are the two plants and both the plants are bearing the flowers. Here is only one plant and there are the two plants. Okay. So in case of self pollination, what happens if the pollens transfer from the male part to the female part of the same flower? Okay. Or if the pollens travel from the male part to the female part of the same plant. Okay. Means two different flowers are there, but both the flowers are on the same plant, then it is self pollination. If the pollination is occurring within one flower, then it is also self pollination, and if the pollination is occurring between the two flowers but both the flowers are on the same plant, then it is self pollination. But if there is transferring of the pollen grains from the male part to the female part of two different flowers of two different plants, means both the plants are different and both the different plants have got their own flowers. Now there is pollination between the two flowers, both the flowers are present on the two different plants. So this type of pollination is called as the cross pollination. In self pollination, the pollination occurs within a single flower or in between the two flowers of the same plant, then it is self pollination. And if there is pollination between the two different flowers of the two different plants, then it is cross pollination. So this is all about the concept of the pollination. Now let's discuss that what kind of different types of flowers are there. So bisexual word means that flower which have two sexes, means any flower which has male and female part both in the same flower, that flower is the bisexual flower. And unisexual flower, this is that flower in which only the male part is present or the female part is present. So only one, maybe female or male part is present. So this is all about the concept of the flower. We have learned that flower is very important part because it helps in reproduction of the plant. Also the outermost is the calyx, then it is corolla, and after that the male part forms the third whorl, that is called as the stamens, and inside the stamen the female part is present, which is called as the carpel or pistil. The calyx and your corolla, they are the non-essential part because they do not contribute into reproduction, but the male part, which is stamen, and the female part, which is called as the carpel or pistil, they both contribute in the reproduction process. So that's why they are the important part, essential parts of the flower, or you can say essential whorls of the flower. Then we talk about the process of pollination. What is pollination? The transfer of the pollens from the male part to the female part, that is called as the pollination. And what is transferred here? Pollen grains are transferred here. If the pollination is between the one flower or within the two flowers of the same plant, then it is self-pollination, and if the pollination is between the two different flowers of the two different plants, then it is called as the cross-pollination. So this is all about the structure of flower. I hope you understood the topic very well. So up to our next video, keep watching, keep learning. Thank you.